ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Jury selection has begun in the trial of Daniel Penny, the Marine veteran accused of a deadly chokehold on homeless man Jordan Neely, who was acting erratically on a New York City subway last year. Many say Daniel Penny was a hero, a Good Samaritan, who stepped in to protect others on the subway that day. And joining us now to talk about all the layers of this very high-profile case is former Federal Prosecutor Doug Burns. Doug, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
What do you think of jury selection in terms of who would you want on this jury?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, you want people. It's kind of hard to, shoehorn in specific, generalizations about it. But you want people who, believe in the right of self-defense. And the lawyers get to question, unlike in federal court, where the judge does it. And the lawyers, I'm sure, during voir dire, I wasn't there, obviously, but, we're going into all that. Do you endorse the notion, Mr. Smith, potential juror, that if somebody's acting, highly erratically, yelling that he may want to kill somebody, yelling that he doesn't care, he's willing to go to jail, do you agree that, there may be a right of self-defense? I mean, that's who they're looking for. People who endorse the notion of defending oneself and defending other people, that type of thing. Sadly, it behooves me to note that it's the prosecutors who really have injected race into this thing, which, I can discuss more later in the discussion. But the reality is, Martin Luther King himself is likely turning over in his grave because this case has nothing to do with race, okay? The defendant said that it had nothing to do with it. The color of anybody's skin should be irrelevant. But I'm telling you right now, jumping ahead, if the victim had been Caucasian and the defendant a decorated African-American Marine, you really think this case would be on trial, Rita?
Right. And that's what many people are saying, that they are really turning it into a racial issue. Your thoughts in terms of, would you want a man? Would you want a woman? Who would you want on the jury? Does it matter if it's an African-American? Does it matter if it's someone who's been on the subway a lot?
Again, it's interesting and really fascinating, having been through many, many, many jury selections. The one pet peeve I've always had with jury selections is people tend to, generalize too much. I'll tell you a quick anecdote very quickly. We're trying a narcotics case in federal court, African-American woman in the back, the defendant's African-American, and somebody said, maybe she should be bumped. And one of the DEA agents, said, are you kidding me? That juror is the defendant's worst nightmare. She's a school teacher. She's been married 20 years. She has 3 children. You see what I mean? So the point is you can't overgeneralize. Now, in this particular case, male-female is a very tricky question. Females might be a drop better in the sense of being more in fear, just as an overgeneralized proposition. You're in a locked subway car, very claustrophobic, very scary. So I think a female dynamic might be something that you're looking for. But again, a broken record. You want to explore in voir dire the notion that people endorse the idea that there's absolutely a right to defend oneself and defend third parties, Rita.
Also, wouldn't you want someone who has been on the subway, who can understand? Because a lot of people see the headlines, and in fact, there's been some headlines of late of some horrible cases that have happened. But would you want someone who clearly has been on the subway, knows how scary, to your point, Doug Burns, when the doors close and, you're going, there's nowhere to hide. And everybody who's probably been on the subway, sadly, has had some pretty scary people that have been on the subway with them at some point.
No, you absolutely want people who are familiar with being in the underground tubes. As you say, the claustrophobia, the scariness, the locked cars as the train is hurtling along. There's nowhere to go. There's no escaping. Absolutely, you would want that. And by the way, that's going to play into it because there are witnesses apparently in both directions, which is interesting and can create some reasonable doubt. Some witnesses are prepared to say, it was absolutely scary and fearful, et cetera. Others, no. While the guy might have been ranting a little, nobody was really scared. And it's really, that bodes well for the defense to me as a veteran trial lawyer in terms of like the baseball analogy, tie goes to the runner. Tie goes to the runner in baseball, it's interesting, is a burden of proof concept. It's a legal concept. If you can't prove that the runner's out, then he's safe. That's the same thing in a trial. If 6 witnesses hypothetically say, we were really in fear beyond, and 6 say, oh, no, we weren't, well, the defendant should be acquitted, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there are apparently witnesses, to your point, at least some of them, even if not all, like you say, but some say, there was one that's saying, one witness said, I was worried about my safety when everyone moved away from me. So when you have even a few people like that, just like you said, don't you think that overwhelms anybody on the other side?
No question about it. And again, the prosecutors, quick legal X's and O's point, they bear the burden of proof to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that self-defense wasn't viable. Remember, self-defense can be very helpful on the defense side of the case. Most cases are tried on a factual defense. In other words, I wasn't there. I'm not the guy who choked somebody, hypothetically. In a self-defense case, it's like, I did everything they say I did, okay? There's no dispute on that. But I have a legal defense, and the legal defense was I used force that was justified under New York state law. And by the way, real quick, you are justified in using force that's commensurate or proportional to the force being presented to you. So to me, when the victim said, I'm going to kill somebody, that's a huge point right there, which could bring into play the justified use of deadly force. Rita.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
Don't miss the biggest Maytag sale of the year at Lowe's. You'll find the Maytag appliances you need when you need them at a great price. Plus, when you buy 2 select laundry appliances, you'll get up to a $100 bonus via instant rebate. Shop Maytag at Lowe's. We help, you save. Offer valid through 5/31. See store for pricing and offer details. Advertise savings on all major Maytag appliances through Maytag.com and participating retailers. Prices may vary. Additional terms and conditions apply.
Now, in the case of self-defense, how do you counter the argument, which is clearly going to come from the prosecution, that he wasn't necessarily the one assaulted or feeling threatened, I should say, because it was verbal, feeling that way, although he probably was too. But he says, look, I stepped in essentially to help others because I was worried. I mean, if you buy that theory that you can't self-defend until they actually attack you, that's a scary place to be, right?
It's a great question you're asking, so here's the answer. I touched on it a minute ago just a little bit, but let me explain it better. Under New York state law, the law of justification, a person is entitled to use commensurate proportional force if they are presented with deadly force. Similarly, very important, you are allowed to use force and justification to defend third parties. Okay. Now, the rules can be a little bit different. The standard is a little more difficult. I don't need to get all in the weeds, but the fact of the matter is you can be justified in defending third persons. So the argument that, he wasn't threatened is not really going to do much for the prosecutors. There may be some hyper-technical argument about the standard and the difference when it's defending a third party. But again, I don't think if the other people stated another way, the variety of witnesses that we're talking about who are going to say, we felt threatened for our life, okay, and he screamed out, I'm going to kill somebody, okay, then the point is, under New York state law, a person is justified in defending those third parties as long as the force is commensurate with the force presented. I've used the example with you before. I'll do it again quickly. Self-defense of myself, Doug Burns. Somebody pulls out a gun, points it at me. I pull out a gun and kill them. That can be justified self-defense. But they pull out a paper clip and they go, I'm going to throw this paper clip at you, mother effer. I can't pull out a gun and kill them because it's not proportionate to what I'm presented with. So here, I keep repeating the point, but it's so critical. If this guy the victim gave off indications that he was going to, quote, kill somebody, okay, then that's going to be a huge, huge point for the defense.
Now, what about in terms of the background, too? The defendant, of course, he is a decorated Marine veteran. How much does that come into play? And also his military training.
Well, that's such a key question because it can cut in two different directions. So let me explain. On the one hand, certainly it can help him, obviously. But on the other hand, it could hurt him getting in the weeds on the theory, wait a minute, a Marine couldn't have incapacitated this person, by some other means possibly, and they're going to get heavily back and forth, like a tennis match, volleying, that type of thing back and forth. Couldn't he have incapacitated him without using the chokehold and all of that is going to be one argument that they're going to use. The other argument they're going to use, which goes right down the road into causation, they're going to say that he should have stopped at the point when he was immobilized. It was interesting because I will use a name, Andy McCarthy, who's top legal expert. He wrote in an article, and I found it interesting, that you can continue to subdue the person until the police arrive. If that's true, and the reason I say if that's true is I had a couple of other experts tell me, Rita, and I think you and the listeners will find this interesting, that under the actual justification section itself, although I didn't see it in there, I didn't study it all the way through, but the point is once the person is reasonably subdued, you must stop. Okay, so that's going to be another big legal horse race, the Andy McCarthy point for the defense, which is you're allowed to subdue the person continuously until law enforcement arrives versus no, you must stop when the threat abates and the person's immobilized. So that's going to be another big dust-up.
What about reports that Daniel Penny, the Marine, was saying, listen, call 911, telling people to call 911? That seems like somebody who was clearly trying to help, and authorities said he was very cooperative. He went down to the police station that day, and it wasn't, by the way, until later that he actually got charged after sort of the video came out and some of the, the media uproar, if you will, or the public uproar, obviously on both sides.
Right, but now it behooves me to explain the obvious, but people do get confused, and it's not their fault. And that is that this man had zero intent to kill anybody, okay? I'm not defending him. I'm just making that core point, okay? And so what makes the case troubling to a lot of average, lay people is, what do you mean? He didn't intend to kill anybody. So they've charged him with second-degree manslaughter, which is reckless conduct leading to somebody's death without specific intent to kill them, and criminally negligent homicide, which is the lower one. That's 0 to 4, The previous one is up to 15. That's where they're coming up with this 19 number, Rita. But the point is, that's negligent conduct leading to somebody's death. So the point is, he was cooperative. The more I look at this case, I've kind of had a shift of analysis. I mean, I spoke to you all the way back whenever month it was, I don't remember, and I was pointing out that, if in fact he applied the chokehold for too long, I could see some theory of liability. But I've reversed my view on this case. I think this case should never have been brought. Come right out and say that. It just should not have been brought, okay? And the last topic, sort of reading your mind, is causation and the narcotics that may have been in the victim's system.
So now why do you think it was brought?
Well, I'm taking a deep breath. I mean, look, Alvin Bragg, has a very, very, checkered approach, in my opinion. I think there are racial overtones, which is extremely unfortunate, but a lot of the experts have come right out and noted that. Again, I'll repeat the point. Hypothetical law school classroom. Decorated African-American Marine jumps in where you had a Caucasian person with a long history of abuse in the subway, drug use, terrible behavior, threatening behavior, and he stepped in. Are you kidding me? That case would never be brought, period. And back to Martin Luther King, what a tragedy. Supposed to judge this stuff on the content of everybody's character, not the color of their skin. So I think that Bragg may have looked at this case through a racial lens, quite honestly, Rita. And it's very, very unfortunate that he brought the case, in my opinion.
And this guy, Jordan Neely, obviously, had a sad life. It sounds like had a lot of violence, a lot of problems. Again, it doesn't give him by any means the right to, threaten others. Right. But it seems like he had a lot of drugs in his history. One of them was K2. Talk about how that could help the defense in this case.
Right. But that, again, is such a critical notion of where we are as a society, and particularly in this jurisdiction. And you have to note that, okay? Very, 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 liberal jurisdiction, Manhattan, with this DA and so forth. And the fact of the matter is, the minute you even mention the point you just made, people will hysterically shout you down, censor you, cancel you. But the reality is, as a trial lawyer, obviously I'm here to tell everybody that if he had a high level of drugs in his system, if medical experts are going to testify that those drugs could potentially have contributed to his death as well as the chokehold, or even more than the chokehold, then you're talking about a totally different analysis. I'm old school. Bring in the experts. Let them explain what they think. Let's look at the exact toxicology, medical examiner report, autopsy report, and have experts explain in their view what was the main reason that he died. We have a concept in law sort of called the eggshell concept, meaning that, you take the victim, as he or she comes, in other words, it's on you. So you choked him and he's an eggshell, that's too damn bad. That is a principle in law. But at the same time, if it's clear that the drugs played a role in his death, I think that's a very important factor, obviously, as it should be.
That's an interesting point. So the drugs themselves may have caused some sort of respiratory potentially, is what you're saying. Look at it that way. Yep. What about also the idea that if it was indeed, say, K2, from what people say about K2, is that it makes you almost sort of feel like superhuman, which could cause anger, could cause screaming, could cause threatening behavior, could cause hallucinations. That's a scary kind of a person who's on a drug like that on a subway.
Again, not to be corny, but the beauty of a trial, absolute beauty of it is you talk about the case in your office, you talk about the case in conference rooms, fine. By the time you get to court, if you give everybody a fair shake and a fair opportunity to cross-examine, to present their side as vigorously as they can, that's an engine for getting to the truth. So to your specific question, you're so right. let's get experts in there to give a nice, calm, sober, no pun intended, explanation of what K2 is, how it works. Could it have made the victim more aggressive and so forth? And then the previous point we just made, could it have played a role in his death apart from, what the individual did? Because, again, on legal X's and O's, the point is, they're saying that he engaged in reckless conduct, which, here's the key word, caused the victim's death, causation. So the point is, if there's some reasonable doubt about what the cause was, then that's something that the defense has to do. I mean, full disclosure, I know Tom Kniff and Steve Razor, they're friends and colleagues of mine. They're good lawyers. They have military JAG backgrounds. And, they'll try a good case as best as they can and make all the points that we're discussing right now.
And you're right. They are really superb and highly regarded, well-known attorneys. How long do you think this trial is going to go? And do you think that Daniel Penny's going to have to take the stand?
Well, they're saying the trial will take 6 weeks. Generally, trials come in a little shorter than what everybody says. So I'm going to go with 4 weeks and change. I think there's a very good likelihood that he may take the stand because, again, you can take the stand in a self-defense case. Back to my point from earlier. If I am charged with robbing a bank, right, I'm not going to get up there and say I didn't do it. If, for example, there's surveillance and videos and stuff, the straight factual horse race. But in a self-defense case, the point is the thing's on video. There's nothing to dispute about what happened. The only question is the legal interpretation of justification in self-defense. So, to get up and say I didn't intend to kill him is irrelevant under what I've explained earlier. But to get up and explain that I wasn't being reckless or negligent, I legitimately felt that these other people were in fear for their lives, stuff like that. So we'll see whether they put him up there because, again, in a factual case, you can expect sort of a withering cross-examination if the facts are with the prosecutors, because you're getting up there and denying something that can be refuted. But in a self-defense case, how can they refute when he says, look, I heard what these people were saying. I felt that they were in fear for their lives, and that's why I acted as I did, et cetera, et cetera. He'll face a little bit of pushback on cross-examination about the length of time and why didn't he cease. But again, that's going to go back to that jury instruction on whether or not, ladies and gentlemen, the law provides that an individual is allowed to continue to use justified force until law enforcement arrives. As Andy McCarthy wrote, he may, believe it or not, be wrong because, again, there's a notion that the jury instruction may be, ladies and gentlemen, under the law of self-defense, you have to cease once the person is, in fact, immobilized. So that's going to be a huge point. But to your question, not avoiding it, I think he may very well take the stand.
Yeah, and by the way, it'll be really interesting, like you just said, those points by Andy McCarthy and also what the layers are. And finally, Doug Burns, what's your reaction about our system of justice based on what you've seen and heard so far in the case? If indeed he does get convicted and get sentenced to jail time, which would be, I think a lot of people will be very surprised.
Yeah, the last thing quickly is an in-the-weeds point, which is that the prosecutors were very cagey in charging him with both of these things. Okay, they could have just charged him with the manslaughter too, but they put in the lesser included offense, which could lead to a compromise. So if he gets convicted, I think it would only be to the criminally negligent homicide. It's a built-in compromise notion, and the judge may, in fact, not give him any jail time. We'll see. But under your formulation, if he gets convicted and he gets jail time, then it's a very troubling situation for American jurisprudence, honestly. Again, this is a guy who, if you believe he was acting in good faith, was trying to defend and help people, and it turned into a tragedy. But again, we can't have racial hysteria, racial stereotyping. That's very troubling to me, Rita.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it could have a squelching impact on Good Samaritans, too, out there who, will be afraid to step in the future, right?
People have been making that point, and I agree. I was asked that the other day, and that's right, of course. The point is, when you see and read in the tabloid or the paper, this individual stepped forward to defend people, from a guy who was acting, very unhinged, and now he's in prison, you're right. It could have a definite chilling effect, no question.
Well, everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. Doug Burns, you are the best of the best. I always love talking with you and getting your great, candid, and very experienced answers. It's always terrific. Doug Burns, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate the kind words. Take care.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.